Now this live stream is going to be about the Venezuelan intervention. I know it's a little bit later than normal. I'm going to start off by saying about the please donate to my Patreon if you can. Now the reason why I'll explain first why it's a little bit later than normal, it's because my fiance had a little bit of a health scare. So I was talking to her for a little bit during that period. This is why we had a little bit of a later than normal live stream that I would have normally done. But this is why some things just come up. She had to basically go to the hospital, and she was filling me up with some of the information. She has to go back for another test, and that's the reason with that we do that. But now back to the idea of this on the Venezuelan intervention, of how we're going to be discussing that. We're going to try to keep every idea with this as quick as possible and trying to get everything busted down as easy as we can do without ignoring any details. Now we're basically going to be looking at foreign policy in the perspectives first. Now we've gone over this in the actual podcast themselves, but now we actually have an active live situation. First, we're going to be going after the three different things and show how they apply here. Now, first we have the liberal perspective. This believes that we can actually change things in an actual image and create some type of utopia and utopian vision. This would be your interventionist. Then you have a realist perspective. This believes that any change amongst countries that's within their leaders would be viewed as anarchy, and the role of a government intervention would be solely to restore said leaders to the original standpoint and restore what would be original to the leadership. And the third one would be basically to restore the third idea is the identity perspective, which relies solely on the idea of ideas being the controlling force. Now when we look at ideas as the controlling force, we see that that would also be against the idea of intervention, as that would be not intervention itself. So if we look at the realists and the identity perspectives, we see that that would be against the ideas of this. The only one would be the liberal perspective that would state that they're trying to form some type of idea with this. Now we go on to the ideas of what is the actual government in Venezuela currently listed as. Now they are an idea of socialism, which is the idea of using force within their government. Now what would the idea to change it to? The idea would be to change it to a capitalist society. Now when we view it, what capitalism is the idea of using voluntary exchange to create actual economic system. Now this is where the whole point actually kind of deflates. When we actually look at this, we see that it's going against whole idea. This is why if we want to actually achieve the role of it, you need to go actually back to the non-aggression principle, which could actually be done so by either the realist perspective. In this case, while the realist perspective would not be ideal in many cases, in this one it would really assert as Maduro being the leader, because it would view any other upset of that system being viewed as being anarchy, or in this case, in most cases, being the identity perspective, being the true non-interventionist system, saying that ideas are actually the way to change systems. And that would be ideal because, frankly, you're using that through voluntary exchange. You're trying to actually do it through actually convincing people to do it through the natural voting process, not through getting them to essentially leave the actual Maduro government, trying to get people to leave and do this by some type of coup that you're trying to create, which is creating a system to where people are revolting. Now, you don't want an actual revolt within that system, because the end result is going to create an actual system. Even if you get some type of capitalist system, it's going to be crony capitalism. And this is why we can claim that socialism is bad, which it is in every single way, because the output is horrible. But intervention has always led to things worse. Take example of the situation in Iraq with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was a socialist leader, and he was not a nice guy whatsoever. But when we took him out, we put basically the people who end up grabbing most of the land from this removal of Hussein were Sunni radicals. Now, these Sunni radicals were terrorists, basically later named as ISIS. So the actual direct cause of this was essentially putting in people who were much worse. So this intervention became much worse than actually socialism was, which is why we actually apply the non-aggression principle and realize that ideas are the thing that change the actual world. You don't win anything over by force, regardless of what way you're trying to do it. You naturally just bring up ideas, and this is the way things actually change naturally. We tried force for so many years with on the Korean Peninsula, yet nothing has changed. Yet there was basically just a spread of ideas that happened in the case of Germany. That's what caused the fall of the Berlin Wall, was just the spread of ideas just naturally. We saw the fall of the Berlin Wall, and poof, end of Marxism within Germany within that period. Now, we see that the fact is that didn't last for that long, but the fact is we see that it didn't last for very long, but that's just the case of what happens. What we see with some of the other points is that we need to understand that if you want these things to happen, we need to look at what could be done. And we need to understand that if we want these things to be done properly, we need to actually follow what actually happened out there and actually be a little more sensible. And this is basically what we look toward. And we then can look toward what we've done in the past also as a reason for not looking for these changes. And we can actually look at what we've done previously in the foreign policy arena. We can see what's happened in Iraq, we can see what's happened in Afghanistan, we can see what's happened in Libya, we can see what's happened, what we tried to do in Syria, we can see what we tried to do in Afghanistan the first time, where we tried to put the Mujahideen in power and put Taliban in power. We can see with the whole situation in all these things that we've done by intervention throughout the years, and you can see that they've been bad, and it's horrible. Now, if we're going to look at how capitalism is and what the actual definition of capitalism is, it's voluntary exchange. The only way you're going to get that is by leading by example. Do it voluntarily. And we need to do this without actually using force. Now, how can we actually do it from the ground up? What we need to first understand is we need to go at least a little bit before this point. Who are the actual people in this actual game first? Not who are the actual people outside, who are the actual exterior players, being China, being Russia, being the United States, being the UN, being some of the other players. No, we don't need to know about them. Who are the actual two major players in this? You have Maduro, who is the actual elected leader, and then you have Juan Guaido. Now, Juan Guaido is a person who has basically been a person who is educated in the United States on what subject? The actual study of regime change. Now, this is a big issue, that he's not exactly a person who is necessarily what we would call a traditional capitalist. He's going to be someone that would be a crony capitalist. I would basically put him in the idea of how we installed the Shah in Iran. And this is going to be very, very similar, that basically you're going to create a very, very similar situation. He's not seeing any real true support behind him. So we're not seeing necessarily any real support behind this person. He's more of an actual propped up leader. So if we actually want an actual capitalist leader that has actually been gaining support, we're not seeing it yet. It's not necessarily that socialism is bad and that one can't be seen. It's just we're not seeing one at this point. And that's where we actually need to view it. And we're not viewing it yet at this point. Now, I'm not claiming that Maduro is some type of benevolent leader, and that's what we need to understand right here. And that's what needs to be understood. And he's not going to be this benevolent leader. And he's probably going to eventually lose by an election. And when it comes down to some of these groups that are looking for some type of change, we're even seeing people that are against military. Even some of the neoconservative groups that would normally be for military change are not exactly for it, because they know they would be catastrophic. Even groups up in Canada that are looking on they would formally look for military intervention are saying that would be essentially catastrophic, because they know what's actually happening. People are becoming a lot more aware of what's going on in the world, and that's something that needs to be understood here. When we start to look at some more things of how things can actually change, well, it's going to have to be from the ground up, and it's going to have to be in these Western nations. It's not just going to have to be in one nation alone. Their thinking is going to have to be taught from, most people think, oh, you have to teach it in these actual nations alone. No, it doesn't work like that. What's going to actually have to happen is we're going to have to teach it in actually these Western nations and start showing that the ideas of laissez-faire capitalism and that laissez-faire capitalism, voluntary exchange, are the only systems that work. Teach the ideas that Keynesian economics fail, and they're going to have to essentially teach all these ideas, show them that they fail, and start teaching the Austrian School of Economics theory as the only theory that actually matters. Start teaching the idea of decentralization, and it will start spreading around, because it's going to be very, very influential. When you start spreading that around, what's going to happen is you're going to start doing it from an educational level, and this is going to be very, very influential, because you're going to be viewed as being breaking ground, and it's basically anybody who resists this new breaking ground technique of education is essentially going to be stuck in the Stone Age of education. And what's going to happen is it's going to basically be those who want to be stuck in the Stone Age talking about Keynesian economics or modern monetary theory, or those who want to be talking about Austrian economics and how it applies to all aspects of life. And it's basically going to split the education system in half. And you're going to see those who are essentially state of the art and those who are living basically like cavemen. And this is what it will do is it will basically cause essentially a catastrophic blow to those who consider the ideas of living on this idea of militarism and on one end and socialism on the other end. So those groups will tend to die, and you will end up seeing where true capitalism is going to thrive. You're not going to see basically is these ideas of this crony capitalism being implemented in other countries. Because what Juan Guaido represents is crony capitalism, and he doesn't represent true capitalism because he's just for regime change, and he would essentially be a person that is essentially against what most of these other people that have actually been for the ideas of sovereignty have actually fought for, that have actually won in the last few years. He would essentially undermine every bit of that with what people have been voting for, the ideas of Trump and some of the other leaders of Bolsonaro out in I'm probably mispronouncing that, out in Brazil, and when we have Duterte out in the Philippines, and then you have these and then with some of the people who have within some of the change of that's happened within Italy, you're seeing some of that stuff actually change as well with it, even though they haven't had necessarily a leadership change. We've seen, and then some of the ideas of the Brexit vote and some of the other ideas of some of the other ideas as the some of the other ideas as like the Brexit vote that have happened. And when we see this, we're going to see the fact of we're going to see some of the fact of the these points going out there and becoming factors in the future. And when we see this going out there, what you're going to see the fact is they're going to be when we see people trying to push leaders that are actually against this, It's not going to work good for the future of those who are actually for people who want the idea of what capitalism does actually mean. And this is why when we're talking about what actually it means for what could be implemented, what needs to be implemented is the idea of teaching ideas of true capitalism to the United States as an educational system, teaching it around from an educational level and letting that spread around, and teaching it as pure capitalism, not crony capitalism. Do not embrace these leaders that have been against capitalism. Embrace these people that have been pro laissez-faire capitalism, and don't embrace these people that have actually been completely against and that have actually destroyed it, that have actually been racist in their careers. Do not preach the ideas that the progressive leaders have been horrible to the nation and horrible to the method of capitalism, and that the current system in the United States is not capitalist, but actually crony capitalist, and that we have not had capitalism for over 100 years. And if we do this, we're going to see that this will actually help get to not only the United States back on board, but it'll also get these other countries in the world back on board. And this is something that's very, very important that I think we can actually look at. And that's something that needs to be discussed. So when we actually look at, let's say, dealing with other countries, we're not going to be dealing with them from trying to overthrow their leaders. We're going to be viewing them as how can we get these countries to a laissez-faire capitalist system. Well, we do this through ideas, not through force, through ideas. Once this comes, you're going to see that this is going to be beneficial for everyone. We can actually do voluntary trade. And that's how things are going to have to be done. You don't do it through force. Because if we think we're going to get capitalism systems and these democracies through force, well, that's completely opposite of what actually happens. We look at how all these democratic republics were actually formed. They are formed from the actual people voluntarily wanting to do it in the first place, and the only reason why war had actually formed was because they were being stopped from them doing it in the first place, and that was from exterior forces stopping the people, and the people were actually voluntarily fighting exterior forces. This is not coming from exterior forces doing the fighting for the people. If the people are not willing to fight themselves, there's no reason to actually fight and engage. Now, if you like this, like, subscribe, click the notification bell, share this all the way around social media when this live stream hits, and if you have any extra money that you would be willing to donate, please please become a patron. You'll see that right below here, and it would really, really help me. And I'm really sorry for being a lot later today. Just things happen for the live stream. Bye, everyone.